Hello and welcome to another lecture. I'm Professor Slominski, and I'm going to be going over two main concepts, the ingredients of a program and the flow of a program. In this lecture, we'll examine the ingredients of a program. The ingredients of a program consist of the following. It doesn't really matter what programming language we're using. Keywords, programmer-defined identifiers, operators, punctuation, and syntax. We're also going to examine program flow, which is input, processing, and output. Part 1. Examine the main ingredients of a program. Over the next 5 slides, you'll take a look at the main ingredients or parts of a program of language construction. Keywords. Keywords are reserved words in a programming language. You may not use a keyword for a variable name. So a list of keywords is here. We can click on it and take a look. So we have a ton of keywords here. These are all the keywords. I'm not going to go through them now. You're not allowed to use any of these words for variable names. Okay, the link is there, so you can check it out later. I'm not going to go through all those now. Programmer-defined identifiers. They're words or names identified by a programmer. They're symbolic names that refer to variables or programming routines. So if we look at program 1, we have a few user-defined identifiers like hours, rate, and pay. All right? These variables are stored in RAM. In RAM, they're actually indexed by a number, but the programmer doesn't need to know that number. They can refer to it with its identifier. In C++, you actually can find out where it is, but we're not going to go through that right now. So if you're looking at your RAM, this is a very simplified version of RAM. You'll notice that in your RAM slot number 23, you're storing the value of 72. Now, we don't have to refer to that spot as 23. We're going to refer to that spot as length. So we would say something like int length equals 72. And the program will know that int length is stored in cubby 723 of our RAM. And inside that cubby, we're going to have a whole number or an integer value of 72. Okay? C++ has many operators. Here's a full list here. So again, we could look at some of these operators. Same thing I showed you before. Let's see. So these are all the operators. These are relational operators. These are more operators. There's a lot of operators. We're not going to go through them all now. All right. The most common operators are your add, subtract, multiply, divide, and mod. They're the ones you're going to use the most. In this particular program we're looking at right here, we could see that on line 18, we're using a multiply operator. Punctuation. Notice how lines 7, 10, 11, 14, 15, 18, 21, and 22 end with a semicolon. You could think of a semicolon as a period in English. Keep in mind, not all lines end with a semicolon. Lines 9, 13, 17, 20 have different punctuation. These are called comments. They provide an English description of what the code is doing, and they're ignored by the compiler in the program. So the program will not execute those lines. They're totally ignored. They're just for somebody to look at, read, and understand what your program is doing. As your programs become more complex, you'll want to make sure that you call it documenting, that you document your program well so people who have to maintain the code base could look and know what you've written. Program flow. Part 2. Now we're going to go into how does a program look in C++. Every program will have the following flow. You're going to have some type of input, processing, and output. Let's go ahead and take a look at what it looks like. Okay? So we have a program here, and you'll notice I put 2 red rectangles around 2 parts of the program. So you'll notice that the first box is getting the number of hours worked, and the second box is getting the hourly pay rate. So what you're doing is you're prompting the user, you're letting the user know in line 10, hey, how many hours did you work? Then line 11, what you're doing is you're going to receive the data, and you're going to store it in the variable called hours. In line 14, you're going to ask them, how much did you get paid per hour? And in line 15, you're going to receive that data, and you're going to store it in the variable called rate, which you defined on line 7. This is very important. You cannot use hours or rate unless you've already defined them. There are some languages you could do that in, but C++ isn't one of them. It's strongly typed, so we have to make sure we go ahead and give it a type and give it a name before we use it. Okay? So that's it. That's how we get data from the user. Let's look at the processing part. You'll notice that line 18 says pay equals hour times rate. So this is the processing part. This is where we're using our computing agent to process the data. In this case, we're just calculating the pay. Notice that if we were to put C out, you've earned hours times rate here instead of pay, we'd be violating one of the style guidelines. And we don't want to do that. It makes your code hard to read and you lose points. And that concludes the presentation. So hopefully you've understand how the flow of a program works and what the main ingredients are of a program. Thank you for watching.